Mr. Speaker, members, this is the same amendment we debated last week, and it's talking about benzene and the impact of neurotoxins on the children. As the columnist in the Star-Telegram said, we are in large measure treating our children like lab rats by not adequately regulating near schools. This amendment simply would have that regulation in place. As of last summer, TCQ mobile monitoring had found elevated levels of benzene in 66 samples at 29 facilities in the Barnett Shale. Last week in this discussion, it was erroneously claimed that there have been no benzene studies correlating health issues. However, I have a stack of executive summaries and titles of studies that have been done on benzene, Division of Toxicology and Environmental Medicine for the Agency for Toxic Substance and Disease Registry, articles from the Houston Chronicle talking about the studies that have been done on elevated benzene and birth defects in Harris County, and one from the Environmental Health Perspectives, benzene exposure near the U.S. permissible level in association with damage to sperm. Now, folks, we have an issue. The issue is we have a great economic opportunity in the Barnett Shale and the other shales that are playing out in Texas, but the issue is the inability or unwillingness of people to adequately regulate against these neurotoxins, benzene and others. This amendment reduces the likelihood of our children and school employees being exposed to dangerous levels of benzene, but unlike the bill, it gives many options for the operator to comply and qualify for the exemption, including step by step, if they'll just use electric motors instead of diesel engines, if they'll lower emitting engines for hydraulic fracturing, if they'll complete with the green completions, if they'll use the low or no bleed pneumatic valves, or if they will reduce emissions by certain harmful pollutants to be equal to or less than, and it's a measured step by step. This is reasonable regulation of an industry that, because it will not self-regulate, is emitting toxins, carcinogens, neurotoxins, and they're doing it next to our schools. Members, as we said last week, the League of Neighborhoods of Fort Worth and indeed the school district in Fort Worth have adopted these regulations and standards.
Mr. Gutierrez,
let me finish this one point. I'll be gladly to yield. The point of this amendment is to codify what needs to happen across the region anyway. By putting it in law, we can establish these half-dozen exemptions if the industry will simply comply with basic health and safety standards. We can move forward. I'll gladly yield.
Mr. Burnam, you and I have had this discussion before, and I have no doubt that this amendment will probably go down like the last one, 101 to 49. But you and I have had a discussion about a documentary that recently aired called Gasland. Is that correct?
Yes, and I know a number of members here have had an opportunity to view that film.
Well, it's my hope that, as you're correct, not enough of them have had an opportunity to review it, because you think that all of those folks just north of Dallas and into Oklahoma, you think that they would now rather want those gas wells to be further from their homes than they already are?
I know scores of people in the Barnett Shale whose families have developed significant health problems because of the proximity to their homes. All this amendment does is to try to provide a regulatory balance such that they're not located within 1,200 feet of school, which is the standard in the Fort Worth ISD right now, that is way too often given exemptions. I'm trying to establish a regulatory framework with a half-dozen exceptions. If these bad players would just become decent, honorable players, they could reduce the pollution, the carcinogens, and the problems that we're having health-wise, but they won't without regulation.
To exemplify what goes on, and just as a pretty rudimentary example, you saw in that documentary how house after house in the Dallas area and beyond in these areas, you saw how when these folks turned the water faucet on, they put a match to it, it would ignite. You saw that, did you not?
Well, there's a problem in some areas, and I don't know that anybody's water out of their kitchen faucet has caught on fire in the Barnett Shale yet. But the fact of the matter,
I'll submit to you that it has.
Well, there's a possibility it has, but there's no question. It's not about possibility. There's no question that we can reduce the emissions by 90% at all of these facilities if we just would. And in fact, if we would provide the regulatory framework to encourage that, these companies would then start recovering these emissions and probably, it is estimated, recovering the expense of their investment within months of the original investment.
You'll recall from that documentary that the oil and gas solution is to provide a reverse osmosis water filtration systems for each one of those landholders, but at the end of the day, that's really not enough, is it? We need further regulation.
That's right. And it's just like everything else we do. We can do it now or we can do it later after we find out just how much it's cost us.
To be clear, this isn't affecting my neighbors down in Bexar County, but it sure is affecting everybody in North Texas.
And it will be affecting people in southern Bexar County because you have a shale yourself. And so you guys in Bexar County better get ready and be looking at what needs to be done to protect the health and safety of your children.
We certainly need more regulation in this area. Thank you, Mr. Burnam.
Thank you. I regret that we continue to have misinformation in opposing this amendment. I think if people would take time to look at the amendment and recognize it is a very simple, straightforward, with 6 points of opt-out opportunities if industry will just agree to become good players instead of the poisoners that they're acting as now.